You know, it was one of the big stories of the weekend beyond just the performances on the racetrack. And, I appreciated getting Christina Blacker's opinion on it, but I'm curious to get Nick's opinion on the vet scratch controversy because, just like every other thing in racing is so overblown on Twitter. And just there's so many people who are just positing all these conspiracy theories about like the vets have it out for this trainer and this horse and they're trying to protect Baffert and this and that. And there's so much ignorance that gets thrown around, and I'm not saying that it's not frustrating. Like West Point has had this happen before, where we've had horses that the trainer swears that they're sound up and down, scratch. Sometimes they come back and win like a week or two later, but sometimes we find something and they're off for like 6-8 months. And I think if you scratch a sound horse, it's not because of a vendetta. It's because there might be something bubbling under the surface that the vets know better than most people. And the trainers obviously know the horses really well, being with them every single day, but they didn't go to vet school. They didn't see all the things that the vets have seen over the years to maybe find something. And I just think if you're going to like lob these accusations of, corruption and vendettas and all that stuff, you got to have some kind of evidence behind it. And I just haven't seen anything that suggests that there's any kind of, nefariousness going on when these vet scratches happen. But Nick, like you come from a horseman's family, like you've seen horses on the backstretch a ton in your life. You've seen, sound horses, sore horses. What's your takeaway when you see these vet scratches and then you see the fallout of it on racing Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two different approaches and probably two different constituent groups that we can touch on. And, Christina did a good job describing the situation for horsemen who obviously feel an intense level of disappointment, but understand that at the end of the day, the care, custody, and control of those horses is their responsibility, right? They're the person that has to make those decisions, and they have to live with the decisions of the veterinarians. The idea that this foolhardy notion that again, there's something untoward going on and, they're going after McPeak's horses or, they're targeting this one or they're trying to help that one is like, it's ridiculous, right? It's like saying that a dentist is going to knock your tooth out to fit his quota of replaced teeth in a month. It's not going to happen. So it's this out of nowhere. And I laugh at it for the most part. The other constituent group that gets irritated with it are horse players. Horse players are irritated all the time. Right? That's just how we are. So this is another opportunity to sort of sound off about it. And I heard a couple of people say, it would just be easier. There's no way they couldn't have made this decision a little bit earlier. Well, if the vet decided that they were going to give the trainer all the way until Saturday morning in order to make a final decision, I want people to understand it's not like a vet saw Tammaro Saturday morning and said, scratched. Right? There's no way that happened. You know that from having been there. You know that from having been around in the process. That was a horse that was looked at. There was some discussion that was had, undoubtedly. There was probably a little bit of, I'm sure, something regarding medication, treatment, things like that was going to be done, obviously all legal. And then we were going to see what would happen race day. So, yeah, it's unfortunate to have to restructure some of your pick 5 tickets and look at races over when horses like Precise and Tammaro and Sweet Azteca come out. But at the end of the day, if we're all going to stick to what we know, which is generally what we're best off doing, let the vets do their job. Right. And then we'll handicap races after scratches and we'll find horses to bet on. And if we don't, we'll move on with it. At the same time, let the trainers do their job, which is to find these horses the proper places to run on the days where they're ready to do so.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like that it's not done on a whim the morning of the race, and that's the first time they saw the horse. And the medication point is a salient one as well. Like there are horses who train through certain things and need to have certain medication, therapeutic medication, just like any other athlete, just like any football players. It's just the medication in their system has to be gone by the time they run on race day. And a lot of times when that does wear off, you will see issues that maybe wouldn't pop up on a horse who does have that therapeutic medication earlier in the week or weeks before. Christina said something really interesting, which is like being proactive as a trainer and like making sure the vets come see your horse time after time before they're entered, before a race day, because we've had that happen a couple of times where horses just like they have like a funky walk or they have like a imperfection on the hock or something, and the trainer or the vet sees the horse for the first time and they're like, well, I don't like that, I'm going to scratch them. Whereas if you're proactive and you go seek out the vet and you tell the vet about like the imperfections or, whatever the horse may have, then maybe they'll be a little bit more lenient to let certain things go and just think, okay, well, maybe that's just the horse. And, this is something that they've trained and they've raced through, and that is just cosmetic or whatever. And, doesn't affect their soundness or their racing ability. And yeah, I think there are so many people who want to play it both ways, where it's like when the vet scratches the horse, it's like, oh, well, this is an outrage. This is government overreach and this and that. And then if the horse goes out and breaks down on the track, then they immediately turn around and are like, oh, what a butcher that trainer is. And like, just constantly running unsound horses and this and that. Like, you can't have it both ways. Like, this is obviously a very frustrating situation for a lot of people. But, Nick, you were talking about it, like, if it bleeds, it leads. If these horses break down during the Breeders' Cup, not only is it a tragedy for the individual horse and the connections, it's a major blow for the sport. And it's something that we cannot afford at this point in our existence. And I think, it's easy to talk. It's easy to say, well, we want to keep these horses safe. That's the number one priority and all this. But then when it comes to maybe losing out on a potential chance to run or using a horse in a ticket that you really liked, then everyone, turns around and is outraged about it and thinks it's such an injustice. I think that's the key, is that there's so much talking out of both sides of your mouth in racing, and especially on racing Twitter, that it defies logic that you could hold these positions at the same time. But I guess that's kind of where we are. And yeah, Nick, I just think I defer to the vet. I defer to the vet. I did not go through vet school. I couldn't tell you like the anatomy of these horses and what affects soundness and what doesn't. And, I think you as a very sharp handicapper, you've seen so many horses that just fall off a cliff in terms of form, and it makes you feel shitty. Like when you're handicapping claiming races and you see a horse that has like that in and out form and just can't keep it together. I feel like you're like me. Like, you don't feel good about those horses going out on the racetrack, even if something tragic doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. You see a 10 claimer that used to be a graded stakes caliber horse. It's like seeing a punch drunk old boxer. You just don't want to see it. You want to see that person be able to, or that horse be able to end their career, hopefully the right way. I also do. I understand a lot of times we overreact to, well, oh gosh, that poor horse is in for 5,000, this and that. I mean, he's still doing his job at the same time. So I suppose I'm taking both sides of that. However, it's when they're drastically falling off, right? If they're competitive at those levels, that's why we have different class levels. That's why we're trying to take care of those horses in the long run. And there are definitely some stories there that, have ended well. But yeah, I think we've got to be careful about horsemanship. We've got to be careful about letting veterinarians do their jobs and getting it all done the right way. So I was sort of annoyed with the whole chorus of it, because the problem also is that now we're allowing people's political motivations to factor into how they feel about federal oversight. And I responded to somebody on Saturday that was making it about power. And I really don't think the vets are walking around as if they have an unlimited amount of power. I don't really think they care about stuff like that. It's sort of like when people say, oh, the stewards are going to disqualify that horse because it'll elongate the pick six carryover. I can tell you from working at Sam Houston, I could go in and tell the stewards that we had a carryover. It would be the first time they knew about it. Right. They're not paying attention to stuff like that. They're not gambling. They're not handicapped. They get a racing form every day, basically to make sure they have horses to follow along with in addition to their program. So it just doesn't happen. This whole idea, again, like you alluded to, that something nefarious is going on. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no doubt. And just to shift gears to something that's also a major bugaboo for horse players and racing Twitter, and this is something that I obviously am sympathetic to, is the odds drops in the CAW. And I know we've discussed it at length on this show, but I haven't spoken about it with Nick on camera, at least. And there was one of those on Saturday in the Breeders' Cup turf, because Ethical Diamond, who ended up winning, was 55-1 going to the gate, and then Broken won as a 25-1 shot. And listen, if you cash a 25-1 shot, like, you're not going to be crying about it, but it obviously makes a big difference, especially if it was a large bet. And, this was something that I thought was pretty disappointing in the Breeders' Cup, not cutting off the CAW bettors with 2 minutes to post, like Delmar does, like Naira does, like Keeneland has yet to do, because to me, that is like the bare minimum that you can do for horse players in this current climate. Like, there's so much more that could be done and should be done. David Aragona, I think, has a good take on it, where it's like every public facing pool where it's like you get probables. I think that those CAW bettors should be cut off with 2 minutes to post so you don't have those late shifts in the odds, because it's just an endless source of frustration for horse players. But, Nick, where are you at on that? Like, do you think that there is an appetite amongst the track officials and the people that run the pools to do more on this? Or do you think they're just going to be like, well, we cut them off with 2 minutes to post, be happy with that?
Yeah, boy, really multi-layered topic. But touching on, I thought to myself as I didn't even realize Ethical Diamond's price cut in half that much until a couple of minutes after the race. And I thought, man, if those algorithms came up with him, then we're totally screwed. Like, we don't have a chance. Because 25-1 on him is one of the all-time great underlays in Breeders' Cup history, in my opinion. You don't have to apologize for betting an underlay when you cash your tickets. But yeah, this is a complex issue, Joe. And I look forward, hopefully, to. There's a panel coming up in the symposium in December that's going to bring together Scott DeRudy, Eric Hallstrom, Dave O'Rourke, Marshall Graham, and Maury Wolf. And it's going to be moderated by my friend Pat Cummings, who's obviously been on your show and who's very knowledgeable on this topic. And, that has the potential to be something that can not only be extremely insightful, because you have track operators there, you have bet takers there that have specific knowledge on this topic. And the problem we're running into, obviously, is that everyone's hip to it. We're seeing the late odds drops. We're seeing the massive shifts. We saw it from Friday early in the day in the second race on Friday. There's an extremely high-profile, large volume bettor that is tweeting about it frequently, and Dave Portnoy, who has a huge following. And, I would never be someone to say that we've got to do something because we're getting negative PR from somebody that, is struggling with this. I really think Dave would benefit from somebody sitting down and kind of working him through some of the machinations of how it goes and why his exactas weren't paying what they were supposed to at Saratoga, in his opinion. So, yeah, I think there are tracks that have tried pricing controls. Pricing controls really don't work because the CAWs are so sharp that they'll take a reduced rebate if they can find enough value, and they'll just bet to a slightly shorter point, but they'll still bet. And the cutoffs are good from an optics standpoint, no doubt about it. They definitely level the playing field for guys like you and I. There's also a major revenue hit there, right. And Scott DeRudy alluded to it in the Blood Horse story that came out a couple of weeks ago. And believe me, I'm not sitting here saying I am pro CAW. I have no interest in any CAWs. I have no reason, but I also am. I don't really want to see purse accounts depleted, right? I don't want to see things become more difficult. So you look at a place like Santa Anita where they cut them off and immediately saw a pretty massive revenue hit. What DeRudy was saying is we've got to find a middle ground on this. Like, we've got to find a way for it to work for everyone. And we do. Now, the group I'm always going to advocate for most is horse players. So yeah, I think the easiest solution is the visible pools have to get cut off. And unfortunately, that means the tries and supers are going to become just an absolute wonderland for the CAWs. And what that means is that people are going to have to understand that sometimes their ultra depressed try payoff, like mine in the distaff on Saturday, is because those win odds aren't reflective of how those horses are bet. And that's been kind of an issue in New York. That was an issue during Saratoga. It's been an issue really quite a few times with regards to multi-race bets, intra-race bets, where the win odds it's not linear, clearly. So yeah, this is a topic that I'm glad it's gaining steam because we need more conclusions on it. We need more conclusive decisions made by operators, and we need something that can really help the health and vitality of the game, because a Monday or Tuesday pool at Finger Lakes that probably is bumping up on 60 to 70% CAW, that's going to be impossible for the average bettor to ever have a chance to make money betting those races.
Well, we need a middle ground too for them, because they're not going to bet against each other if all the regular horse players leave the pools. Like they don't want to take over 100% either. So yeah, it's incredibly frustrating, and I think I've said this before. Like, especially in a world with ubiquitous sports gambling, like you're going to lose people, or you're never going to gain people, because some new bettor who's used to betting fixed odds sports betting bets one time and has their odds cut in half after the gates open. They're going to be like, screw this, I'm never going to do this again. One last question I have for you on that before I'm going to go to my little bee in the bonnet from the Breeders' Cup coverage. I see like these pick five pools that are like retail only. And I wonder, as someone who like really understands like the liquidity of the pools and the way that they're affected by the CAWs, is that just like PR ass covering? Because I don't think I don't get the sense that the pick fives or the pick fours are the ones where they're really crushing these combinations. It usually seems to be intra-race bets or at least doubles. Nick, what's your take on that? Do you think it makes a difference with those large, long, elongated multi-race bets to have them be retail only?
Yeah, it's a little bit of let them eat cake, right? It's not really a solution. It's throwing out some crumbs to the starving. And I also think that we make a big mistake in general from a racetrack operations perspective by pushing people into those pools. The problem is that when it's their best alternative to pools that are being ravaged by CAWs, then they really don't have much more of an option. Right. I mean, I'd much rather my customer not tie up their money for 2.5 hours in a pick five. I'd rather them be able to bet into the win pool, maybe bet some doubles, bet exactas tries. But the problem is we don't have all those properly priced. We've got them priced too high. They need to be priced lower. And they need to be pools where at least what's visible is not inundated with money that you can't see. And the whole thing is that the CAWs want to keep their money in the dark as long as possible. So here they're getting their last opportunity. But yeah, they're not as pervasive in multi-race pools, especially elongated multi-race pools. So it is, in a big way, I think you described it well. It's the track sort of saying, we know they're kind of ruling those other pools, so we're going to give you this and let you play into this. And it'll just be, you guys playing amongst each other. I wouldn't even call it a Band-Aid on a broken arm. I'd probably call it something like walking to CVS to buy a Band-Aid for a broken arm.
That's great. Great analogy. No, I mean, I think that's correct. And I think that there's a lot of kind of just making appearance that we're doing something about this problem and not really actually doing something about it in most instances. But something is better than nothing. And I got to say, not seeing those big odds drops at NYRA makes me more confident betting into the win pools, at least. So I think that's the bare minimum. And I think the Breeders' Cup not doing it was just basically because they knew that people were going to bet hand over fist at the Breeders' Cup no matter what. And they didn't have to, extend that courtesy to the regular horse player. All right, let's load up the graphic, Julia. I have a bee in my bonnet from the Breeders' Cup coverage, and this was from On Track. Let's hear the bee buzzing around, I think we got a little sound effect that goes with it too. And let me preface this by saying this is not a criticism of the people that were on camera and on the show. We just had one of them on, and Christina Blacker, who does an unbelievable job, and so many smart people are on that Breeders' Cup host show. However, when you're at Del Mar and you're at the races and there is nonstop talking over the PA as soon as the horses hit the track, and sometimes before that, I think it's like very, very distracting and detracts from the experience of being at the Breeders' Cup. And I just think it's kind of part of a larger trend. Like when I go to basketball games now, like there isn't one single moment of silence. There is constant music and chatting and yammering over the loudspeaker. And this is my old man take, I guess, that it's too loud at sporting events, but I think it's true. And I don't know, it really kind of grated on me throughout the day during Breeders' Cup weekend that there just was never any kind of period of silence once the horses went out onto the track. And again, not a criticism of the people who were doing it. They have great insights, but like, I just felt like I didn't have a moment to think and, actually talk to people and sit down with the racing forum and have some kind of clarity and peace about it. And that's just a minor thing I wanted to say. Like maybe next year, what I like is when NYRA does is they have like the discussion in the paddock. When horses are in the paddock, they'll have Maggie or Acacia come on and they'll talk about the horse's appearance. And I think maybe if you want to do the thing that Santa Anita does, where it's like with a minute or two to post, they have like people come on and give their final looks and their final takes at the horses on the racetrack. But it's such a great event. It's so festive and, it's so social that I just don't think we need the constant talking over the loudspeaker, no matter how smart or, how helpful the people on air are being. So that's just my old man take of the day. Next year's Breeders' Cup, can we have a little bit of silence once the horses come on the track and maybe pipe people back in with 2 to 3 minutes to post? That's my thought. That's my feeling. Nick, are you with me on this old man take?
I like you being the get off my lawn guy, but I've
come a long way.
And the irony of people talking incessantly at Keeneland will not be lost on me, right? A place where it was dead silent until a little over 30 years ago. They didn't even have an announcer. I think, from a horse player's perspective, I don't really want to hear anything after the post parade. I'm making my decisions at that point. That's sort of my time to hold things sacred. And it's very rare that anybody's going to say anything I find particularly insightful. I understand the thought that you want to keep the crowd engaged as much. We play music at Sam Houston from the post parade to the start. And I've been trying to figure out what songs can we introduce that would maybe get the crowd going a little bit. So I watched the Melbourne Cup last year and you got 60,000 people singing Sweet Caroline. So there's got to be something, but that kind of stuff is fun, right? And that's like a one-off. Right. You're doing it maybe 1-2 times a night, but otherwise, I don't really want to hear a whole lot of chatter on the broadcast. If I want it, I'll turn it on. Right. I don't want it to be my only option. And at a place like Churchill, where you and I were at the Derby this year, where the audio is outstanding and you can hear Travis Stone and whoever is speaking during the pre-race and the handicapping, you can hear them from anywhere. I thought they had the proper amount of quiet when it needed to be had, because you just don't really want to hear that all that time. And the number of people there that day that don't really have any racing knowledge, they don't care at all. So, I think it's something you've got to be a little bit careful about.
Yeah, it's noise pollution. I like the idea of having music leading up to the horses walking to the gate, because then at least that's something that, like you said, you can get the crowd into it, or, it can be something that's like somewhat soothing in the background while you're making your handicapping decision. So again, no disrespect to the people that were on the show. I think they do a great job, but I just think the decision to have it on the loudspeaker from the moment they walk onto the track into the gate is kind of a faulty one. I hope they make an adjustment in the future.